part of the PR team at earthwords. Um, earthwords is the oldest undergraduate literary magazine on campus, and our mission is to showcase the best literary and artistic endeavors of students attending the University of Iowa, including poetry, fiction, nonfiction, drama, art, and photography. Our publication provides its staff with the experience of producing a literary magazine in real time by ethically reading, selecting, and supporting the work and authors found in every issue. The Earthwords team is committed to broadening its accessibility, empowering our community, and promoting equity and justice for underrepresented voices. Although the team's style and length change every year, Earthward's dedication to promoting the diverse array of undergraduate creative works is a constant. As many of you probably know, we just had our launch for issue 45 as well as our spring chapbooks. So those will be coming in greater numbers in the next couple days and weeks. So I encourage everyone to get a copy if you haven't already. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Haya.
Okay, I'm just gonna share my screen really quick. Hi, nice to meet you guys. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Haya from HSUP. Okay. So like Anna said, I will be presenting on DEI and publishing and creative writing. So just a quick intro, I'm a freshman at UI. I joined honors second semester, so you can basically do that anytime you want. You don't have to join honors right when you get here. And my majors are journalism on the pre-med track, and fingers crossed I get a writing certificate. And just to touch on that creative writing part, I love poetry. And those are two of my favorite books. But basically, to get us started, what is HSUP? So that stands for Honor Students for Unity in Progress. If you're wanting to come to our meetings, they're weekly on Wednesdays from 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. Our mission is to be a voice for marginalized communities on campus. We want to foster a sense of belonging and provide people with the opportunity to advocate for DEI initiatives, and that will hopefully build a culture of belonging at the honors program. Some of the initiatives we have, right now we're doing like a social media one, and basically with everything going on with DEI and the changes in our legislation, we want to bring light to everyday privileges and accessibilities that people might not know are DEI, but they are, and that's why it's so essential. And the forefront of the forefront question here is, why is DEI and publishing and creative writing so important? And there's a multitude of reasons, but these are some of the main ones that I was thinking of. High quality publishing is not cheap. It's not easy to access. Of course, you can always self-publish, but to really get your name out there, it can be a little bit more difficult. According to Data US, 80.3% of writers are white, and most of them are primarily male. A lot of the writers that you encounter in your curriculum might be male white authors, they might be straight, cis, and the list goes on. And when you build characters and you want to create a story, you should be able to understand the cultures, the economic situations, the racial and sexual identities that you are writing about. And of course, we do know that there are underrepresented perspectives in storytelling, and 14% of the population remains illiterate. And although that may seem like a small number, that's well over 700 million people. And in the grand scheme of things, that is a lot, and a lot of these people are struggling with poverty, war, and other conflicts. But just in like overall, writing is a great tool to fight oppression, and it fosters literacy and academic prosperity. We rely on writing in every discipline in our lives, and publication is everywhere from STEM to arts and more. So, just some opportunities at the University of Iowa. One that's really dear to my heart is the International Writing Program that is run and overlooked by Christopher Merrill, who is a very renowned American journalist and author. He's incredible, and his team is incredible. And basically, what the IWP does is they bring people from around the world. And Christopher Merrill himself is very well traveled. He's a great person to just sit down and talk to about DEI as well. They bring these marginalized communities and bring authors and journalists from there to Iowa City to do readings and Q&As, and that kind of goes into the third point here about attending readings and Q&As. This is a UNESCO City of Literature. That's a huge deal. You can go to Prairie Lights, or I believe The Graduate sometimes has huge readings, and people will talk about literature that is not American, not even in English, and it's a great way to get involved and see global literature. And then, of course, classes. There are so many classes here, both English and creative writing, and also publishing, that are built on cultures and backgrounds like race, gender, and sexuality on screen, global science fiction, and publishing is also a big discipline here as well. And you should always invest in your library. We have the main library, the sciences library. We have plenty in Iowa City, and you should read banned books. They are available at bookstores. Understand why they are banned, and that can play a huge part in our current legislation and how DEI is kind of being pushed out. So just something to keep in mind. And this is my personal favorite, but little free libraries. I was actually in the science library earlier looking for a place to present, and this small library was just sitting there. And yeah, it's like tiny. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this fate? Like, I just came across this and I'm talking about it today. But it just goes to show that books are everywhere and you can access them really easily. Some external opportunities, and these are low in cost and really easy to access. The Adroit Journal is a really renowned journal. You can submit poetry, prose, and they publish you, I believe, for free. So, and their team is extremely experienced. You get to work with them, you get to meet other authors. We Need Diverse Books. They provide grants for LGBTQ, BIPOC people, and you can work with them to publish your book. And this one is also one of my personal favorites, the Kundaman Retreat. This is for primarily Asian Americans, and that is like any type of Asian, like Southeast Asian, South Asian, East Asian. You get to go to New York on an all expenses paid retreat, or it like varies from 200 to 400, and you get to meet with other writers and experience global literature. Some other ones are the Tin House workshops. The Penguin House has an internship that is paid called Oh, the Places You'll Go. They might have changed the name recently, but it is just meant to provide more experience in publishing to people who are marginalized or underrepresented. And HarperCollins does kind of the same thing. It's a 10-week summer program that is also paid, and it's primarily to help you publish in diverse fields. And yeah, that's all. If you have any questions, that's my email. If you want to keep up with the work that we do at HSUP, you can check out our Instagram. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Haya. We really appreciate the honors program like collaborating with us. And on that topic, our star of the evening, we have Candice Wuehle. So in addition to being a faculty member here at the university and teaching courses here through the University of Iowa Honors Program, Candice Wuehle is also an author of the novels Ultranatural and Monarch, which was named a Best Book of 2022 by NPR, Spin, Lambda Literary, Crime Reads, and Nylon. She has also written three collections of poetry, including Fidelitoria, Fixed or Fluxed, Bound, and Death Industrial Complex, which was selected as a 2020 finalist for the Believer Magazine Book Award. Candice holds an MA in Literature from the University of Minnesota, as well as an MFA in Poetry from the Iowa Writers Workshop. She earned a doctorate in creative writing at the University of Kansas, where she has a Chancellor's Fellow. Her studies focus on the relationship between trauma, memory, and the occult. She also publishes a monthly newsletter, Camp, Kitsch, Schlock, and Schmaltz. So that is just a small insight into who Candice Wuehle is as a person and the incredible accomplishments she has. But Candice, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, I did all those things, but I can't really figure out how to get the blur off of my Zoom right now. So That's another dimension of me. Um, Hi, that was awesome. I just want to say that was a great presentation. Really informative and important. So thank you. I'm glad I got to see that. Okay, I'm gonna share this PowerPoint. I'll probably go back and forth um, between the PowerPoint and just us chatting. So yeah, just to summarize what I'm gonna talk about today, just gonna give you a little mini talk about navigating publication, about my own writing process. I have a book coming out with the University of Iowa Press in about a year, and I thought it would be fun to read you a little bit of it. You'll be the very first people I've ever read aloud from this book to, so. Yeah, and then I'll answer whatever questions you have. And I do want to talk a little bit more about different ways to get involved with honors. But before we do that, I would love to hear from you a little bit. So if you could just tell me what your name is, what your major is, what your writing goals are. I'll try as much as I can to adapt what I'm talking about a little bit to what you're thinking about doing and what you're concerned about. And I love perfume. And today in my generative writing class, I had my students, we do a question at the start of every class. And today I had them tell me what their favorite scent was, and it was actually really fun. So we're going to do that too. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our gallery. Anna, would you start?
Absolutely, I will. That is such a fun question. Well, I already kind of introduced myself, but hi everyone. I'm Anna. I'm an anthropology major. I'm actually not studying writing or publishing myself. I mostly just like journal for fun. That's kind of like my experience with writing. Favorite scent, um, like just smell in general, like baking bread. I'd say, you know. Scent for like fragrance, I wouldn't necessarily want to smell like baking bread. I'm more of a vanilla person, but
Nice. Okay. Yeah, you don't have to tell me your favorite perfume scent. I just mean your real favorite scent. Haya, you want to go next?
Yeah, I already said this, but my name is Haya. I'm journalism and pre-med. My writing goals, I love to write poetry, so probably just refining that. I do it for fun. And my favorite scent, this is a little bit of a weird one, but musk. I like musk. It's
Yeah,
nice.
me
I
too.
wouldn't wear it, but it's nice.
Okay, thank you. Sophia?
Hi guys, I'm Sophia. I'm an English and creative writing major with minors in communication studies and news and media literacy. I really like writing poetry, and I'm currently in the very early stages of a magical realism novel. So I guess just anything about your writing process would be really helpful for either one of those genres. I know I know you write poetry, but just in general. Um, and my favorite fragrance would probably be either cinnamon or vanilla.
Nice. Lillian? Hi.
Hello, I'm Lily. I'm an English and creative writing major on the publishing track. I write typically poetry or creative nonfiction, but I'm really interested in editing, and I'm currently interning with the University of Iowa Press. So I'm really excited that your book
Okay,
is out soon. So
awesome. So is it you and Virginia? Are there any other interns there?
yes, we have two other marketing interns. One's a graduate student, Danielle, and then I'm not sure what Abby's major is, but she's in our marketing department as well.
Cool. Okay, thanks. Madeline?
Hi, I'm Madeline. I worked with Dr. Billy on the Poetics Taylor's version class. So if you guys like Taylor Swift, you should totally take that class. It's so much fun. Okay, that's my quick promo. I'm an English creative writing major. I write primarily poetry. So something that I would like to be better about is just like getting more comfortable reading or like putting myself out there to read at more places. And my favorite scent, it's funny that you mentioned this because one of my professors, Paige Lewis, had us like smell teas to like generate like writing. And I got this like lovely like black tea that had this like hint of orange. It was very nice. So that's what I'm thinking of.
Good one. Yeah. Thank you. Ashani, another TA from Taylor.
Hi, I'm Ashani, yes, and I was also one of the TAs for Poetic Tales version. Totally recommend that class. I'm second year, double majoring in English and creative writing and psychology. I also write mostly poetry, and I guess after college, I would want to do something with poetry, maybe get an MFA. My favorite fragrance would be either vanilla or something citrusy.
Nice. Thank you. Mackenzie.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie. I am a like sort of junior, sort of senior. I'm graduating December. English and creative writing major on the publishing track. And I have a minor in news and media literacy. I'd say in terms of like my goals, I'm a poetry person, so I would like to just get better at like making myself submit my poetry places because I
Mhm.
don't like to like it's just annoying to have to like submit and like write cover letters for things. But yeah, and I think my favorite scent is probably cucumber, if that sounds weird.
Oh, that's an extremely 90s Bath and Body Work
That's
throwback for
why.
me. So nice. Angela? And you
Hi,
don't have
I'm
to turn your
Angela.
camera
Oh, I'm
off
so
if you don't want
sorry.
to. Oh,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
just saying, no, no pressure to turn your camera on if you don't feel like it.
Oh, no, I'm just currently in Ireland, so it's like past midnight, so I am like dead.
Thank you for being here.
But I was just saying, hi, my name's Angela. I'm a poli-sci major with a minor in cinema, so most of my writing is dabbling with screenwriting. And then in terms of favorite scent, probably something warm and sweet like caramel or vanilla.
Uh, Nithya? I hope I said your name right.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Um, Hi, I'm Nithya. I am a psychology major on the pre-med track with a minor in English. And I kind of tend to write like really anything. I'm trying to explore a lot of genres right now. And I think my main goal is just like finishing projects because I have a mile-long list of things that I've started, but I haven't been able to get back around to. And I don't know, I guess my favorite song would be like fresh jasmine or something like that, something very like white floral. I tend to like
Yeah,
those a lot.
nice. Thank you. Your writing goal is extremely relatable. Disha?
Hi, my name is Disha. I'm a journalism and mass communications major. Um, I typically read more than I write, but right now I'm writing a podcast script for one of my classes, and then I'm writing an article for my job. Um, and then my favorite scent, I have two. I have like one that's like comforting, and it's the smell of like garlic and onions like frying on the stove. But usually I can't wear that, so I like the smell of roses.
Nice. Thank you. And I think Catherine is our last one.
Yeah, I'm Catherine. I'm majoring in English creative writing on the publishing track, so I'm very interested in editing. Um, and then also I'm getting a minor in linguistics. I tend to write more poetry just because that's what's comfortable to me, but I guess I want to lean into prose more, so that's a goal. And then favorite scent, I guess like dough, like baking. I love baking, and then also like chai lattes.
Oh, good one. Okay, thank you all. All right. I go back. Okay, so, oops. Yeah. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about my story, talk a little bit about submitting to literary magazines and contests. That already came up a little bit in your own introductions. Um, and I have kind of moved from being a poet to writing full-length novels. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that. And then I think there were some pre-questions, and people are just always sort of interested in knowing about the daily writing life of an author. So I'll talk about this for a couple minutes. Okay, so my story, I'm from Iowa City. I went to West High, and I had a really important mentor when I was in high school, Mary Shebist. She was a recent graduate of the Writers' Workshop at the time, and she just really encouraged me to keep working on creative writing, and it's what I wanted to do anyway. But I don't know that I would have become as serious about it without her encouragement. Um, and then, fun fact, Mary went on to win the National Book Award a year after she was my teacher at West High. So I stayed in touch with her for a while, and she also was really generous in like taking me to literary events in Iowa City. She took me to my first reading at Prairie Lights. We saw Donald Justice, who I hope that you've all heard of as people interested in writing in Iowa City. So from there, at that time, the University of Iowa did not have the creative writing major that you all know about. That would not come into being until the year after I graduated. So I was an English major. I was a literature major. I did my first year in theater though, and then I switched over. Um, After I remember it specifically, after reading The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, that was like the gateway poem for me, as it is for a lot of people, actually, including Jory Graham, if you know her work. So, um, I'm really glad that I was a literature major, though. I've noticed throughout, especially my teaching career, that I have a really different background, um, especially with American literature and like an understanding of the way that evolutions happen throughout poetry and movements and where they come from, and just a really different sense of what the cultural, political, and historical contexts are for where poems come from. And I think a thing that I notice in graduate poetry workshops, especially, is like this question of, is this even a poem? What is a poem? And that this is sort of a almost philosophical question that even once you've decided that you want to go to grad school for this, then that's almost the point when you really start to ask yourself, is what you're doing within this genre? Is it something else? Is it anything at all? Right? Those are really normal questions to ask yourself at some point. So I had those questions too, but I feel very prepared to talk to students about their poetry, especially because of my background in literature. So I bring in Harry. Do you all know Harry Stakopoulos? Some of you do. So he was actually my honors advisor. And I still kind of hear him in my head sometimes, not when I'm reading, but when I'm writing, in terms of tracking motifs and interiority of a character. And like most of the things that I picked up that inform the way that I write fiction in particular came from my literature background. So I just really want to encourage you. I heard a lot of journalism majors, a lot of editing majors, especially for those of you who want to go into editing. Knowing the history in particular of American Lit is really going to prepare you in a different way, both in terms of your own knowledge and also, I think it really helps emotionally to know what has happened before, what you should and shouldn't be surprised by. So, as much as you can, you are in one of the best, in my opinion, universities for taking both big survey and small discussion courses about literature. So I encourage you to do it. From there, I still thought that I would become a professor of literature, in particular, I wanted to study Gothic women's literature in the 18th century. So yeah, I started with reading a lot of horror novels, which still really, really, really influences what I do. And I went to the University of Minnesota for that. But while I was there, I just did exactly what I told you not to do. And I took a bunch of creative writing classes. But at that point, I had like tons of literature already. And I was starting to get a little bit bored in the literature courses. So I took a class with a woman named Maria Damon, who, if you've ever heard of micro poetries, she invented the term micro poetries. She went to Stanford in the 80s and she was just like really a part of the critical theory scene that combined with poetry at that point. So from there, I applied to PhD programs and I applied to one MFA, which was the Iowa Writers Workshop. And I was like, if I get in, then I have to go there. And also, I'm from Iowa City, so my parents were still around. So I ended up getting in, and then I had to decide. And obviously, I ended up going to the workshop and studying poetry there. And my dissertation was what became my first book, Bound. And from there, I went right into my PhD at the University of Kansas in creative writing in general. So while I was there, I was working on collections of poetry, ended up writing a couple more. And then I took this summer class with, they had this really intense theory program in the summers there. And I also highly recommend for poets that you take some theory courses or at least read some theory. And my main advice for reading theory is to not try to make it make sense. Like it's Joyelle McSweeney said this to me. She's the niece of the McSweeney from McSweeney's magazine, and she was my big mentor at Iowa. And it's one of the most important pieces of advice I've ever gotten. Um, when you're reading theory, don't treat it like math. Don't try to make it add up. Just follow what you're interested in because that's the part that personally makes sense to you, and you're going to get a lot out of that as a poet or a writer. So I was really into taking theory classes, and I think a lot of the reason why I was like maybe a little more resilient than some of the other people in my cohort was because I I wasn't trying to make every single thing add up. I mean, it takes years of reading dense theory to make it all add up. So I took a course with a woman named Kathy Caruth, who pioneered trauma theory. And I was just really interested in what she was saying and specifically how it connected to language and the idea that until we have the language to speak ideas into being, they tend to go unnoticed both by medicine and by culture at large. So I started my novel Monarch shortly after that. And Monarch is about a beauty pageant contestant who is experiencing episodes of sleeplessness. And then she realized she's involved in this deep state government conspiracy that's recruiting teen girls and children from beauty pageants and programming them to do government missions. So that all sounds like very like trashy almost. It sounds like a cross between like a teen movie and The Bourne Identity. But for me, the inspiration for this was what I was learning in trauma theory and the way that like memories become suppressed or become part of who we are, and then we act those out in the world in ways that we haven't totally processed yet. So, um, I published that book and from there went on to sort of start my teaching career and ended up back here in Iowa City because uh, a thing that I did not realize about Iowa City until I moved away from it is that it is probably the place in the United States that takes being a writer the most seriously. As was mentioned, we are a UNESCO City of Literature. We have monetary support for spaces and programs. I remember being appalled the first time I went to a reading and realized I had to pay $25 to go in, because that's just not an experience you have in Iowa City, but it is pretty much everywhere else. So enjoy while you're here. Stay, don't feel bad about staying here either. But yeah, I love being here. I love being so close to like what is happening in real time with creative writing in America. So, in terms of submitting to literary magazines and contests, this was something that I was always like, I think I became unhealthily obsessed with this. And now I'm at the point where one of you mentioned where it's annoying to do this, right? But it just became almost gamified for me to be on Submittable, and especially as a poet, once you start producing a lot of poems. So, I think, I mean, I almost wish that I put in a screenshot of my submittable so you could just see pages and pages of the rejected pages on it. And then, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I think for every 20 rejections, there's one accepted. So that was the rule that I came up with is just like, I'm not going to let myself feel bad. I'm not going to take it personally. And every single time I would get a rejection, I would go back and I would submit at some point when I was in grad school to three more outlets. My main advice about that is something that you're all pretty much already doing, which is when you're on the other side and working for a literary magazine, that is the only way that you really understand what's happening and that it's not personal, that you might be getting passed over for a submission because they already accepted something like that, or that's just not the theme that they're going for. They published something like that in their last issue, or there might be one single person on the masthead who's really arguing against your piece. So it feels deeply personal. The only way for it not to feel personal and just to be resilient and to keep, putting in the hours for me, was to realize what's going on behind the scenes and just to make it a habit in my daily life, I guess. I already talked a little bit about moving from short works to books. I'll tell you, I never thought that I would write a novel. W.H. Auden said that he thought that a novel was a miracle and that he could never do it, which is pretty amazing considering what a giant in poetry Auden is. But I kind of agreed with that. It just wasn't a goal of mine. And then after I took that trauma studies class, I was starting a new book and I like had a vision in my mind. I had mission and vision for this new book. And I sat down to write a poem that would be in it. It was going to be prose poems. And this poem that I wrote just had a main character in it and it invited a narrative. There were like narrative questions coming up that would be answered later. And that was sort of my first inclination that I might be writing a novel. So I decided to just try the first chapter. And one of you asked in your questions that you sent through the QR code, what if I have any inspirations? I definitely do. But at the time, I think probably the one that's changed my career most was that I read Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh, which some of you have probably heard of. She also wrote My Year of Rest and Relaxation. And that's a book that a lot of people hate with a really unlikable main character. I loved it. I loved how voice driven it was. Um, I loved that it seemed to be more about characters and themes than plot in the end. And I read that and I was like, I can do this. Like, I think you'll all, if you haven't already, find a point where you read either poetry or fiction or something and you're like, I've never seen this before and I want to do a thing like it. So that's what I started doing with Monarch was like I felt like there was a place for it, I guess. But I also just started writing a novel that I would want to read that I didn't think existed yet. Um, so that's the short version of how I started moving from writing poems to books, is I thought I was writing a poem and it became a book. And then Trump got elected and all of these things started to happen. And I didn't want to, my poetry was much less direct than my fiction. And I started to want to publish work that had a much more very clear political statements in it. So I've been writing novels since then. Who knows? That could change one day and I could go back to poetry. I don't know. Didn't know it was going to happen in the first place. So my daily writing practice, really changes depending on the academic calendar. So I teach a course in the spring semester called just Generative Writing Workshop. And one of the big things that we work on in there, or that we practice rather in there, is thinking about the things that you need to put in place in your life to sustain having a writing career. So those are things like how much time do you need? What is your job? What is your writing space? How do you carve out time? How much time do you need per week? Can you conceivably have that much time during the semester? Or do you ask yourself different creative questions during the semester and then do the majority of your writing over breaks? So if you're interested in those things, you invited to take that class. But the other thing that we do in there is on Fridays post spring break, we just come in and we write. And the idea of that is just to get it in your body of what it feels like to write when you probably don't feel like it. And also what it feels like to have done it at the same time. I always think of the Mary Oliver quote, um, that you can make time to write every day and sometimes it won't happen. But the point is to make an appointment with genius. And at some point, genius shows up, hopefully. And I think it does if you stick with it. So those are my main ideas about daily writing life, creative discipline. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to this overlaps a little bit with what I just talked about, but in terms of inspiration, I really make it a point to read my contemporaries, in addition to I'm at the point where like I've read the major canonical American literature and now I mostly focus on what's being published in the last few years. I try really hard to read something that came out um within the month, like a brand new release. And it's just really like, I feel like it's hard to be part of a conversation if you're not there when it's happening, right? And there's something just really vital about reading reviews as they're coming out, thinking about how works are interacting, and thinking about what you have to say about this. What would you do different if you had written this? So I'm really inspired, I guess, what I'm saying by especially other women who are publishing really feminist fiction or poetry right now. In terms of teaching, um, I, the major way that teaching interacts with my own writing is that it's sort of a great laboratory to think through questions, but I also just get so much in terms of what my students are interested in, what questions they ask that I had never thought to ask before. Um, and you all are always looking like more towards the future in some ways than I even have the capacity to be. So, I mean, I remember I was teaching at this women's university in Virginia a couple years ago, and my students were so interested in magical realism and video games. And then shortly after that, the novel Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow came out, which was like very much about video game structure and these different approach to narratives and a lot of the conversation that like the term main character energy and NPC like were not a common part of the discourse yet. And those really influenced the way that I thought about narratology. So I think mostly, so I guess the way teaching influences my writing is I just like to know what you all are thinking about. It's more interested than a lot of the stuff that critics are thinking about, honestly. And okay, I have philosophy here. My main writing philosophy is that's just your taste. So especially in workshops, um, I think things are changing, but like when I was coming up and when I was at the writers' workshop 10 years ago, there was still much more this idea of like top-down workshop authority. The person running the workshop had the answer at the end, and you should be writing towards something that already existed. And I think that's really the most boring way to write unless it's interesting to you. Which is to say, like, you might find John Steinbeck fascinating right now, and you might want to write something in conversation with that or something imitating his work. That's great. It's going to sound different coming from you. Um, and I just don't want it to sound like I'm saying that's not a perfectly legitimate, and valid place to be coming from, right? But for me, I'm very suspicious of anyone who doesn't accept work on its own terms and who thinks there's any such thing as good or bad. Every new thing that's ever occurred, someone has said it's bad because it didn't look like something they'd seen before. So I take it really seriously in my workshops that we don't use subjective language at all. Um, and we really focus on trying to align, did the writer do what they meant? Did we see what the writer meant to do? Or is there still some space in between what the writer was aiming to do and what we saw? So once you sort of really get into that space, and it can take a little while to get there, but it makes everything you do a lot easier. And like, I'm sure most of you have experienced like the editor in your head as you're writing, like what's my teacher gonna say? What's my best friend gonna say? If I submit this somewhere, will they think this is weird? And that starts to go away once you really embrace the idea that it's just it's just taste. It literally or scent, right? To go back to what we started with. Some people like one thing, some people like another thing. That doesn't mean either of those things are better than the other, really. Um, yeah. So not my my carefully planned animation didn't work. Okay, so this is not the real cover, but this was a fun cover that I made to show University of Iowa Press what I was thinking about. If any of you have ever seen the colors for the book Touch of Jen, or I think it's called Patricia Wants to Play, that are very like campy 1950s kind of covers. So my book coming out with the University of Iowa a little less than a year from now, I guess, is a alternate history of a pop star a lot like Britney Spears. So it's sort of this combination of early aughts pop stars, like Britney and Jessica Simpson, Lindsay Lohan, Paris Hilton, and this is about her and her best friend that she has a psychic connection with. And her best friend is a poet. So it's also about different approaches to art and being commercial as an artist. And like, how do you deal with your spirituality when you're trying to navigate being an artist in an extremely commercial world? It also has a lot to do with um, celebrity and like social media and being watched in real time, and how much of your interiority do you give to your public, especially in a world where like the more interiority you give, the better it seems in terms of engagement. So stop my share. And yeah, I'm gonna read to you for a second from it. Not super long because it looks like we're kind of getting low on time, but just pull that up. So this part that I'm going to read to you is the main character's Vegas residency. If you hopefully know what that is, it's like when a pop star is getting towards the end of their career, they go to Vegas, they do this residency. Elvis famously had the first one, and it ended up actually being a lot more like indentured servitude for Elvis than an actual residency, if you know very much. As was the case for Britney Spears in terms of the contracts her family had her under while she was in her conservatorship. So I think that's all you need to know about this is that she's stepping on stage for this. And her best friend that she has the psychic connection with has just called and told her she should not go on stage tonight. So picking up from that phone call is this first line. What I remember is I hover in the space above the stage in a harness. I'm covered in the crystal-studded bodysuit and using all my core strength to stay upright because the angel wings attached to my back are heavy. As the cloud of dry ice clears, I appear to the audience as like a disco angel. I can only hear the mass of people, their screams and applause a snarl. Sky ripped by lightning, the miraculous cheer. I smile, eyes wide open, but I'm stunned by the brightness and totally blind to anything beyond the stage itself and the perimeter of guys on crowd control. Like always, I check for the blinking red light of Giancarlo's and Rick's headsets. Those are her bodyguards. If I don't see their flickering dots, I make a designated hand signal to the stage manager who will pull me back into the rafters. It's never happened before, and it doesn't happen tonight. I lift a microphone to my mouth, sing the opening of Love Parade. Then I'm lowered to the stage. The harness unsnaps completely as soon as my heels hit the ground. I go directly into a dance routine. Lights up on the backup dancers. Perfect sync. From the corner of my eyes, I see the jumbo screens beaming my magnified face to the audience. Everything is exactly like it always is. I smell smoke and electricity, but that's normal. That's just pyrotechnics. Big gold cages, 20 feet high maybe, are ascending from the stage floor, rising like popped toast, zombies. Some of the cages contain doves, and some of the cages contain girls dressed like doves, their makeup sculpting their eyes and mouths into winking eyes, severe beaks. The dancers sling me up so the ball of each foot is supported by the shoulders of two different men. We stay that way for just 5 seconds, but it's enough time for me to remind myself of my mom, of us watching Gene Kelly, who was never afraid. I'm not afraid either. By this point, I'm wired. I'm safe, like I always am on stage, with everybody looking. Like I've suddenly grown too hot to touch. The dancers drop me, I hit the ground striding, I make my mark like I always do, and the song ends, the lights drop. There's no rustle in the crowd. There's no screaming. There's nothing. And then there's a man on stage. He's white, baseball capped, too old to be one of my fans unless he's here with his kids. I just stand there, not even stunned, just looking, trying to figure out who he is, why he needs to be on stage. Maybe this is planned. Maybe I'm supposed to sing happy birthday to this guy. Maybe he has cancer. It's possible. I'm not afraid. Then Giancarlo is on stage too. I've never seen his face look the way it does right now. He touches the man, who seizes in midair. It's like Giancarlo electrocuted him. Now I scream. Now Rick has his arm around my waist, and he's lifted me slightly, so it looks like I'm walking, but I'm not. In the wing, I see Ken Zambora. He's mouthing something, or maybe he's screaming. His mouth opens wide, and he holds his arm up, making big, sweeping motions. Wave, he's saying, wave to the crowd. I do it. Rick carries me off. I smile and wave. We hurtle down the secret halls, back to the dressing room. Rick locks the door, and I see Kelly crying, saying, "Oh my God, love, oh my God, are you okay?" And I'm about to say, "Sure," when I begin to shiver and the room slides. I don't ever scream. I don't ever cry. I don't think about what I don't think about. I stabilize, I take some oxygen, I take a drink of juice, I take a call from Jimmy, I go back out, and I finish the Return to Love tour. My reaction did not play well to the media. I couldn't even fucking get attacked the right way. All right, so that is that excerpt. That's about 2/3 through the book. And that, thank you. That's based on a lot of different accounts that I read and shocking YouTube videos that I've watched of stars like Beyonce and Madonna getting attacked, like someone running up from the audience to attack them on stage. And a lot of writing that book was just me thinking about like, how do you do a job like that? And especially when you like I was just talking about us as writers, thinking about how people are going to receive what we do, right? But you're doing a job like that, especially in the early 2000s, where the media was just so mean, and inappropriate with celebrity. And then how do you go right back out and do it? And just like trying to enter that mental space, I guess. So I think we only have like 5 minutes left. So I'm going to go over and transfer to questions from you all. Feel free to drop them in the chat or better yet, ask them in your video screens. Madeline, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Ask me a question.
Yeah, I guess I was gonna ask, like, going from poetry to prose, like, what were like I don't know if I want to say the challenges, but like, what are the differences in like sort of the approach that you take to that work?
Mhm. Well, poetry is so like you can sit down and you can write your whole first draft of a poem um in an afternoon, right? Sometimes in 10 minutes. And you can never do that with a chapter. I mean, you could, but you'll like have a migraine at the end of it. So the big challenge for me that any editor I've ever worked with would tell you is just continuity and timeline and keeping it all in my head at once, which is so technical, but it's the truth. And it's also, I mean, it's the difference between like sprinting and running a marathon. There are so many points when you're writing a novel where you could quit and where you're really going to want to quit and where you're really going to feel like you made a mess, you know? Whereas with poetry, it doesn't take less time, but you feel more finished after every poem. And you've invited yourself to write other poems as you're working on one poem. So it's for me, it's a lot more psychologically challenging to write long form fiction. And then there's also, of course, like the reception. I mean, I had one book that was a Believer Book Award finalist, and it was a #1 bestseller with small press distribution for a few months. So like in terms of poetry success, that's the same as my novel, but writing a novel is just so different because more people buy novels and they get publicized a lot more, and like magazines will write about your novel. So you end up doing a part and for a while a full-time job of doing publicity and stuff when you're writing fiction. Yeah.
I had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
You can go ahead.
Okay. I had a question about how you approach like kind of emotionally intense scenes in your prose and whether you mostly like I guess depending on the situation that you're writing about, like whether you take things from your own life or like use research to back it up, like the emotions
Mm.
that people are feeling or how you express it and kind of your relationship with both of those options.
Mhm. Yeah, the emotions in my work are always my own. I told you like the very outlandish premise of Monarch. But another uh, fun fact about Monarch is the main character's birthday is my birthday, down to the day and year. And I did that because I wanted to be able to include like my own emotional reactions to things like the O.J. Simpson trial and with these big media events that were happening, and just what it felt like to grow up in a culture that was very encouraging of really violent things towards women, like eating disorders and like very specific about issues related to appearance. So in terms of, and my work does have a number of emotionally difficult scenes. I know some writers really don't enjoy doing those scenes. I almost think it's my background as a poet where I organize writing in terms of sensory details and images. So I've never thought of it this way before, but it's almost like there's this little bit of layer of remove when I'm working from the craft place, maybe more than ever when I'm writing those scenes. So I think that's how I cope with doing that. And then I feel guilty when I send them out for someone else to read them, that they have to look at that. But yeah. Uh, so we have a question in the chat. Uh, how do you build characters that seem realistic? I feel like in so much literature, especially dialogue, doesn't feel natural to a character. But I was looking at your work and it seems that even situation by situation, the characters are able to respond in ways that are cohesive. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Um, I have a little trick where most of my characters are people that I know. And sometimes I'll have like text message threads or emails from those characters. And I remember one of you said that you are majoring in linguistics. And I was an editor for a linguistics magazine in grad school while I was writing my first book. And I really thought about language in a much more scientific way because of that. So I will like lift different ways that people speak from text messages and emails, and I'll really pay attention to the way that people are talking, just in conversation. So I think that, yeah, and I just been like, I read dialogue out loud. I'm sure you've heard that before, but yeah, I think that that's my approach to dialogue. But I really appreciate that because no one's ever said that before. And also, you just always feel cringe when you're writing dialogue. You just do. So, have your friends read it out loud for you and see how it hits you. Do we have time for one more question or should we wrap up?
We can do one more if anyone has one last question.
I think Ashani had. Ashani, did you have one?
Yeah, well, my question is, how do you convince yourself to write something even though you know that it's not going to be as good as some of your previous works? Because like as a writer, sometimes I feel like this idea is not strong enough, but like I need to keep writing, but I just can't
Uh-huh.
get out of the feeling that oh, it's gonna be bad. So like what's the point of writing it?
You have to trust that you want to do it for a reason. Like if you had already addressed everything about whatever you're writing about in whatever previous piece you're trying to live up to, you wouldn't be doing it again, you know? So I think I think I felt the way that you're identifying when I was in early grad school, probably, or just like a sense that like you've already started and it's not good enough. Sometimes you just need to put that away for a while, but mostly I think this is very honors program reflection moment of why do you feel compelled to keep doing this? And if you really make yourself answer that, I think you're going to realize there's a really good and valid reason. So that said, about the honors program, I did want to quickly mention a couple ways that you can all become more involved since this is cross collaboration, which thank you so much for doing this. It's awesome. So there's my course that I already mentioned, and I have TAs for that course. So I know a lot of you are like way beyond needing a course like that. But I'm super collaborative with my TAs and love to let them plan lessons, as Ashani and Madeline can both tell you from the Taylor Swift class. The Taylor Swift class is a poetics class. So if you're interested, and I really need like people who know the craft of poetry TAing for that. So if you're interested in that, get in touch with me, just email me. We have a book club in honors that started this year, and they're doing a really good job sticking with their meetings and having great discussions. Um, there's also, I think you probably all know about being a writing fellow that's supported through the honors program, and that is an amazing way to actually become a better writer yourself. But also just like feel free to send me an email. Ashani and I meet and talk about both Ashani's poems and just some poems that we want to talk about, maybe once a month this semester, and it's really fun. And so if any of you just want to stop by, it's a policy in the honors program that our doors are always open, and yeah, I would be thrilled to see you. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Candice, and thank you all for joining us. I'm also really glad that we were able to do this collab between the honors program and earthwords. So yes, thank you so much. That was so informative. Yes, and thank you, Haya, as well, for sharing from HSUP.
Yeah, thank you. All right, good night, guys.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.